Good evening, everyone. This is the second in the series of top fives that I'm going to produce, albeit this one might end up being more like a top 10 because I've chosen soul to be the topic of this conversation. Because Jacob requested it in the video that I did in the comments about blues, but also because if you're a member of the Shorts Cut Club, I have an unbelievable amount of soul records coming up in the next few weeks for your delight and delectation. And so I set myself the challenge of a top five soul records of all time, and I couldn't do it. Sorry, I settled on a 10. And even then, I have some. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to show you the four records that didn't make the top 10. So a couple of rules. One album per artist. So that was tricky because I have some favorites that have multiple records that I adore, but only one. The definition of soul. Now that's an interesting one. Soul knocks on the door of funk on occasion. So I've tried very hard to lean away from the more obvious funk step-offs, but there may be one record that certainly straddles both. And the other is that this is not about consolidating or high-fiving those who've made, the canon lists of the greatest soul records of all time. This is my list of the records that I listen to and that I reach for, and that when folks come to my place and say, shall we listen to some soul? These are the records that I pull off the shelf. So there you go. All right, the four that milled around and I debated but didn't make the cut are as follows. I'll show you all four. Still Bill Withers. I'm Still in Love with You, Al Green. Knock on Wood, Eddie Floyd. And this was the hardest. This is in position 10.5. Or if I'd allowed myself a joint 10th, but I didn't, would be the Baby Huey story. The living legend that was Baby Huey. If you don't know this record, it's really something. Baby Huey was a rather unhealthy dude. He didn't make it through the recording of the record, unfortunately. You can see that he has some heft, but you can hear it in his voice. And because the record is kind of unfinished, there are some instrumentals that would have been absolutely stellar if Baby Huey had been around to write some words and to deliver his indelible scream over the top. But it's a very fine record. Obviously, Eddie Floyd, Al Green, Still Bill Withers. Don't get me wrong. Those are all wonderful. But they're not my favorites. They're other people's favorites, but not mine. So there we have it. All right. So they did not make the cut. In order, 10-1. God, this took me ages to do. I'm probably gonna disagree with myself as I go through this, but here it is. Number 10, counting down to 1. Swamp Dogs, Total Destruction to Your Mind. Swamp Dogg, Jerry Johnson Jr. He's still around. He released a record last year. Oh, it was funny too. It was, help me raise some money so I can buy some more auto-tune. That's what it was called, or something very close to that. And it's really good. Look at, there's Swamp Dogg. So, what is there to love about this record? Well, Swamp Dogg is, he's bonkers. What a great name, though. think of him. I read a description that I absolutely adored. That think Swamp Dogg is halfway between Otis Redding and Frank Zappa, which I love. He's completely bonkers, sampled to the hilt, a cult star, great voice, very very upbeat. The actual title track, "Total Destruction to Your Mind," is more like punk soul, to be honest. And I mean, I have no idea what this cover is all about. I think that's Tin Hat he has on. I don't know. It's brilliant. It's very, very, very entertaining. It's also kind of like a protest record. There's songs like "Synthetic World" and "If I Die Tomorrow, I've Lived Tonight" that are kind of definitely challenging the status quo. He's a cult outsider because he never wanted really. I don't think he ever really wanted to be, Marvin Gaye. But it's a great record. Anyway, number 10. "Total Destruction to Your Mind" by the mighty Swamp Dogg. Now, what's interesting, you saw Baby Huey earlier on, certainly has some heft, as does Swamp Dogg. But this is a record where the hit single off this record went stellar. And what I love about it is the hit single is great, but it may not even be the best song on the album. And there's so much to love about it. And it's this: "Mr. Big Stuff" by Jean Knight. There's Jean. There she is, looking kind of sultry and rather adorable. There's Mr. Big Stuff. Now, you will notice a little bit of a theme. I mean, there's no doubt that the absolute stellar period for soul music is that kind of late 60s into kind of mid to late 70s, before soul kind of vamped into disco and other things. And this record label, Stax, was, maybe this way mine's better, was instrumental to this incredible genre that really, I suppose, it delivered black music to the masses much more than blues ever did. And I love how melodic and often playful, but also challenging it is. The production, incredible. Jean Knight's voice. It's an absolutely delightful record. There's a lot of great female soul singers, and there's more to come on this list. But Jean Knight is somewhat, I think, underappreciated, and this record's fabulous. Number 9, "Mr. Big Stuff," Jean Knight. All right. I've just noticed that there is a voluminous theme because now we've got number 8, Big Black and His Congregation. Now, this is the rather wonderfully titled, "If you're digging what you're doing, keep on doing what you're digging." And there's Big Black, who plays the congas, by the way, and sings, with his shovel in front of a massive digger. Okay, we get it. So I really appreciate this title in that all capitalized, properly capitalized, all the apostrophes are perfectly placed, no spelling mistakes, because I notice these types of things. And what's really rather fabulous is that typically when we see bands that have very long song titles, like Sufjan Stevens and others on occasion, they never ever sing the song title. But Big Black does. If you're digging what you're doing, keep on doing what you're digging, is the chorus. Now, there are other songs on this record that definitely straddle soul and funk. So this one is a little bit of a stretch. But I do think that there's enough in this record that's pure soul that keeps it in the box. And that is with one caveat. That opening track at about the 4-minute mark spirals off into the most psychedelic fuzz guitar breakout. It is absolutely brilliant. And it is one of those records that when I listen to it, I cannot help but smile. And so, it's brilliant. If you ever see this, if you've ever come across this and you're digging through a crate and you see Big Black, do not go past it. It's absolutely fantastic. All right, that was number 8 on the list. Now, you don't really think of soul music being the bastion of a concept album. It's not really what it's about. Certainly there may be themes, you think about what's going on, etc., where there's an ecological and care for the world theme, but rarely are there true concept albums. Well, here's one. David Porter, An Opera, a Victim of the Joke, ? David Porter wrote songs with Isaac Hayes and had a very successful songwriting career. But when he decided on the Enterprise label to put out this record, which I think is maybe 71, 72, it can't be much more than that. Certainly the production style would suggest that that's, 71. There he is on the back sleeve. Who would have thought that this singer-songwriter with a really cool voice, obviously not the baritone that Isaac Hayes is, his voice is more of a standard soul voice. Some really well-placed cover versions. An absolutely incredible 10-minute centerpiece. The last song on side 1, which, because it's an opera, it's called Act 1, and each of the songs are called scenes. Yeah, that's the conceit. It's called I'm Afraid the Masquerade is Over. It is a song so good, so incredibly good, that if this record was surrounded by dross, I would still have to seriously consider putting it on the list. Thankfully, it's got some great tracks, including an absolute belter Beatles cover. But the thing that makes this a concept album is that interspersed with the songs are scenes of dialogue describing a love affair. And I'm going to stop there, because if you choose to listen to this record, it's best you don't know, because you got to try and figure out what the hell it is. And if you do, let me know. But I love the record, and the interludes are sometimes interludes in these types of records can be really stilted and really kind of dull, and the kind of clang that just doesn't work. Well, I don't know how they did these ones, but the voice actors do a really good job, and it's really fun. There we go. Number 7, David Porter, An Opera, Victim of the Joke. 6th place, and probably the first true classic, 1970s, Spirit in the Dark, Aretha Franklin. Those of you who tune into my shortcuts videos will know how much I rave about this record. There are 12 songs, and Aretha accompanies herself on piano on all but one. The opening track is side 2. When the battle is over, she does not play piano, because she is such an extraordinary piano player. And the way that she can weave that incredible instrument that was her voice in between the keys, it's really something. More amazing cover versions, When the Thrill Is Gone, for example. But quite a few original songs. And it's just a record that it just screams quality. And I know you could choose something like this, because I thought about this. Do you go Something like this. I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You. Brilliant album. Absolutely brilliant album. But I don't love it as much as I love Spirit in the Dark. There you go. So that's number 6. Aretha Franklin, Spirit in the Dark. We're now into my top 5. Top 5 soul albums of all time. Number 5. Phases of Reality by William Bell. This is the most recent discovery in my top 10 list. I only discovered this record maybe 3 months ago. In this feed, you will see a few months back, I reviewed a box set that I bought from Vinyl Me Please based around the label Stax. And this record was in that box. This record, from the second I put it on, it entered my musical lexicon and my consciousness around music immediately from track 1, which I believe was the only single released from the record, Save Us. It starts off with these driving drums and like a completely thuggish bass line, the horns all over it. And I was thinking, it doesn't sound like Stax. It really doesn't. It's a really full production. It's like they just went for it. And so when you dig into this record and when you kind of understand it, it was the last record that William Bell did for Stax. He'd made a bunch of records for him, for, The Sound of the Bell, I think was that the right name? It doesn't sound right. It was something like that. Was a huge hit. And so he was a Stax legend. But he decided not to use the Stax house band for this record. And he went to Memphis and he recorded with the Memphis Shoals Band. And you could hear it. And they challenged themselves. Like, there's the Stax dudes and there's the Memphis. Chicago, Memphis, all right, can we make this work? I don't know. And they pushed themselves. This whole album. It would not surprise me that, give this another few years of me living with this record, that it becomes my favorite soul record of all time. It was his answer to What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. So it is a record that thinks about the world and how we leave it. And Phases of Reality is his treatise on that. But it also has some really personal things. So personalized songs from the perspective of a black man who's in trouble. And probably the most successful of those is track 3 on side 1, $50 Habit. 3 minutes and 33 seconds of absolute musical perfection. It is a perfect song. The bass line, the psychedelic guitar solo, the chorus, the anger behind the kind of the play in words that are in the lyrics. John Prine can write a great song about drugs. Of course he can. And it can hit you in the heart. But $50 Habit hits you in the heart and makes you want to dance. It's pretty incredible. The whole of side 1 is, I think, one of the most perfect sides of music I've ever heard. If you don't know it, put it on, play it loud, and let me know what you think. I love this record. Thank you, VMP, for introducing me to this. I love the sleeve, everything about it. Look at him. He's an unbelievably beautiful man as well. What a voice. Just a great, great, great album. And it's only number 5. But if we did this list again, I might reconsider. All right. So number 5 on the Stax label the last record he ever made for Stax, William Bell's Phases of Reality. In fourth place on my list of the greatest soul albums of all time. And I think maybe the only one of these records that's not in the 70s. This record was made in 1969, and it is called Is It Because I'm Black by Syl Johnson. His debut album. There he is on the back. Firstly, the opening track on side 2, Is It Because I'm Black? 9 minutes and 20 odd seconds. It had been a hit single. And I think not just a hit on the R&B charts, but on the Billboard and in other charts around the world. It's Syl Johnson's response to the news about the assassination, well, I guess both apply, of Martin Luther King. And, it is an immensely angry but heartfelt song. And the funny thing is that it doesn't strike me, and of course I can never understand in any way how people like Syl Johnson and others felt, is they were trying to get the basis of human existence and fairness. But it's so sympathetic too. It is like there's a wisdom to it, even though there's passion and anger, that is really something to behold. And as a debut album, I'm kind of blown away, because it's like side 1 is like just a series of singles, and every one of them could have been a hit, and then side 2 just smacks you down. For a debut record, kind of extraordinary. And I'm pretty sure he ended up on either Chess or Stax as well. But Is It Because I'm Black is maybe one of the most passionate records about living in 60s, turning into 70s America. And soul music was perfect for that. Anyway, it's a beautiful record. Syl Johnson. Yeah, I love it. And it's still only number 4. These 3 records. I debated the order of these 3 long and hard. And I'm debating it again right now. And you know what? I'm going to change it. Third place in this list is the only live album on the list. I think the greatest live album that there's ever been. Those of you who've been watching Shortcuts for a while know how much I love this record. It is King Curtis live at the Fillmore West. I know that the tragedy that underpins this record, I'm a sentimental dude. So it plays on my mind about what this record means. But there he is, with what looks like his tenor sax. Aretha Franklin wanted to record a live album. She recruited King Curtis's band, at that point the greatest band in the world, Cornell Dupree on guitar, Bernard Purdie on drums, Billy Preston on keys, King Curtis himself. And she rehearsed them, and she decided she would make a live album, which became Aretha Franklin Live at the Fillmore West. But King Curtis came out and supported Aretha, so his band came out and played, and then instead on stage, and Aretha came out and eventually Ray Charles and others, and they all appear on Aretha's Live at the Fillmore West. But King Curtis's Live at the Fillmore West is the better document. Covers Led Zeppelin, covers A Whiter Shade of Pale. The cover of A Whiter Shade of Pale may well be the greatest cover version that's ever been. I remember the first time I heard it when I was at university, and With Neil and I, the movie was re-released. And for those of you who know that movie, A Whiter Shade of Pale plays over the opening scene as the two main characters career down the road in I think it's like a yellow three-wheeler, I can't quite remember now, and Richard Curtis, was it Richard Curtis? No, Richard E. Grant, leaning out the window, screaming "Scrubber" at the girls that they drive past. And all the while, A Whiter Shade of Pale is playing in the background. What a choice by the director, Bruce Robinson. Legendary movie, but this album, it's, I think, if there's any live performance that I wish I could be transported back to so I could see it for myself, it's this. Beautiful record. Which meant, for those of you watching closely, I swapped 2 and 3 around. Number 1 stays number 1, and we'll get there in a minute. But number 2 is this record. Back to the World, Curtis Mayfield. Between approximately 69 and 75, Curtis Mayfield had maybe the greatest run of records in the history of recorded music. And I don't say that lightly. Records like his debut album, Curtis, like Roots, like this one, Back to the World, like Superfly, like his record about America. And why? Well, his voice in the impressions, that high, that almost soprano voice, was supplemented by a bunch of other voices, and they created some special music, of course. But in Back to the World, which I think is either his 3rd or 4th record, every song, the voice is like an instrument, of course, because it's so distinctive, but it's another almost kind of concept album about looking after the world and taking personal responsibility for the things that you do and leaving behind a legacy that you can be proud of. Why is this record the second best soul album of all time? I think it is because every single song has its own identity, is impeccably produced. The strings, his own guitar playing on on Future Shock. Future Shock, what year was this made? I think it was like 74, maybe 73. The guitar playing on Future Shock is amazing. Right On for the Darkness, with the strings swelling. Oh, it's one of those records where the old cliche, every time you listen to it, you get something new out of it. I was walking the dog this evening and I was listening to side 1, just on Spotify. But it's one of those records when I'm listening to it on headphones, I have to turn it up to the absolute maximum because it is so well produced that even on, streaming Spotify to headphones, the way that the bass and the drums and the strings and his voice and the guitar mesh, it is kind of mesmerizing. Whilst Curtis Mayfield is an appreciated star, of course he is, I wonder, do people realize just how much of a genius this guy was? Really, he's an astonishingly good record. I cannot recommend it high enough. If you don't know it, Back to the World, Curtis Mayfield. such a brilliant musician, but also a really thoughtful and beautiful mind. And again, another reason why soul music is so utterly special. Which brings us to my number one soul album of all time. And you know what? The other 9 records were also Rand's. This one was always number one for me. This record has always been my number one soul record of all time. I knew it the first time I listened to it. The first time I listened to it, I remember thinking, did she know what she produced? Did she have a clue that she had a record that could be so impactful on a middle-aged white guy 50 years later? In fact, I'll be 50 next year, and this record will be 50 as well. This record is the same age as me. I love the sleeve. I love the title. I love the title track. I love the production. I love every song. And it's this. Ann Peebles, I Can't Stand the Rain. The title track that John Lennon described as the greatest song ever written, whilst also announcing drunkenly that he had intentions, let's call it intentions, toward Miss Peebles, and she was not best pleased. Ann Peebles. The second or maybe third record from Hi Records, or maybe the second Hi Records record on the list. Hi Records being a record label, I think owned as well, but the main guy was Willie Mitchell. And Willie Mitchell made some records himself. He's a songwriter, producer, multi-instrumentalist, all-round talented dude. But he ran Hi Records in the 70s and produced record after record of impeccable quality. And there are some hallmarks of that Hi Records sound. Obviously, they're the biggest star on the Hi Records calendar was Al Green. And Willie Mitchell's run with Al Green was pretty special. And what you get is these crisp drums where the drum is all about anchoring the song and is not showy. And the hi-hat is always present, but so crisp and so clean. The horns are organic and supplement just about every song. It's kind of like a signature of the Hi Records sound. There had to be melody. Every song was edited to perfection. If the song needed to be 3 minutes and 32 seconds instead of 3 minutes and 38 seconds, they would find a way to strip those 6 seconds out. There is no fat. Everything is pristine. And so why this record? Well, I think that her voice and the way she sings and the way she weaves the melody in and around these pretty simple song structures, it's, to my ears, it is how singing should be. There is, in the same way that the backing tracks absolutely reject the idea of showmanship and of a solo that doesn't necessarily mean anything, her voice is the same. She will not oversing anything. But what she does is slip the melody of her voice in and around the melody of the instrument so that on occasion you feel like you're hearing two melodies at once and it just works. And the strings come in perfectly. There are, on the third track, Until You Came Into My Life, there's one of my favorite moments in recorded music where she sings in her low register. And it's funny, in her low register, she doesn't sound a million miles away from Al Green. You can kind of hear why they came from the same stable. But then she moves into her higher register, and honestly, the hairs on my neck just rise. It's so special. I think this record is truly beautiful, and it's my number one soul album of all time. I love it. And you know what? When I heard that title track, I Can't Stand the Rain, which has got this, I guess it must have been a sequencer, whatever the early 70s equivalents would be, because you can hear this lolloping loop that does genuinely kind of create this feeling of when you look out through a window and the rain is hitting the window, but you're inside. It's got this rhythm to it. It's a fantastic record. Fantastic record. And Peoples, I Can't Stand the Rain. My number one soul album of all time. Well, there you have it. I would love to know your thoughts on this. What have I missed? What should have been in there that wasn't? I think there's a few that other folk would probably have on their list that didn't make mine. And I'm happy to have that debate. Maybe there's one or two that you might not have heard before that you might go and investigate. If you do, I'd love to hear what you think. And if you are a member of the club and you get my mailing list of records, you will see over the next few weeks that some of the greatest soul albums in the history of recorded music will make their way out into members of the club all around Australia and New Zealand. And I can't wait for that to happen. So there you have it. Shortcuts, top 5/10 soul records of all time. I hope you find this enjoyable. I know that I was rambling on for a long time, but I guess that's the nature of these things. Thank you so much. If you stuck it out to the end, please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I'm hoping to find some new soul records to explore myself. And thanks again. Till next time. Oh, well, if you have an idea of what my next top 5 should be, put it in the comments. I read them. And I'll do something about it if you'd like me to. All right. Thanks, everyone.